Welcome to the 3DownNation podcast. I'm Justin Dunk, joined by John Hodge. Training camp upon us, Mr. Hodge. Are you jacked up for the season or what?
What are you talking? Training camp is not upon. Rookie camp is upon us. Training camp is almost upon us, but you're putting your cart before the horse, my friend.
It's here, bro. By the time people listen to this, training camps
true
are set to open or will be open.
Sunday morning, they will be open. I will be there at Princess Auto Stadium in Winnipeg. Our guy Pablo is going to be there in Montreal, and a bunch of our other contributors will be popping in and out of training camps along the way. I know some of the training camps can be tough to get to, like the Lions are quite far outside of Vancouver. Obviously, the Rough Riders are all the way in Saskatoon. By the way, I once referred to Saskatoon as being west of Regina because it is, and a bunch of Saskatchewanites got really offended saying it's north, and it's like, well, it's northwest, but whatever. But regardless, it's going to be a great opportunity for us to get into these camps, see the latest additions on the field. There's always at least one star player, right, who nobody knows about coming out of camp and then lights the league on fire, right? Obviously, we've seen guys like Nick Anderson, Trey Vavel, etc. do that in recent years. So it's going to be fun to do that. And it's also going to be fun to hear from a lot of these coaches for the first time in a long time and get back into the swing of things. So I'm excited. I'm jacked up. I know our listeners, I know our readers are. It's going to be a good one.
The most unique part about training camp to me over the years is that you have big NFL names with not so known names in the football space. You have guys from big time NCAA schools. You have guys from Canadian universities and small schools in the United States, all on the same field competing. And to your point about stars popping out of training camp and then going on to really affect the regular season, even the coaching staffs and the front offices don't know what's going to happen. That's the beauty of competition. And when you put these guys on the Canadian field, a lot of them, especially the rookies, learning the game for the first time from an American perspective in terms of those guys coming up here. So that's what I think is most unique. Hodge, you spoke to it. You never really know who's going to pop off as much as we talk to people, even in the league. They'll tell you that, hey, we got a lot of talent. We feel like we do on the roster. We'll see how it plays out in training camp and let the best man win at a bunch of these key position groups that we're going to dive into as we get into the podcast. But let's get to it. We're discussing some concerns from CFL personnel people about moving the season up in 2027.
Position battles to watch in camp in Winnipeg and Saskatchewan.
Seth Hundeby's sudden retirement from football.
Darian Newell signing with the Edmonton Elks.
A hot dog promotion in Toronto.
I know you're excited about that one, Justin. And a college football game coming to BMO Field. But first,
3DownNation has unveiled our annual highest paid series. Position by position, we have broken down the financial details to the cent for the top earners in the Canadian Football League for the 2026 season. What stood out to you from the list, Hodge?
Well, we're not done the series yet. The series will wrap on Sunday with the defensive backs. But the number one takeaway for me is the quarterback list. A lot of these guys are not maximizing their value, right? And a lot of them have talked about this on the record. Like Trevor Harris, for instance, said, my goal isn't to be the number one highest paid quarterback. Well, Levi Mitchell has talked about leaving money on the table at this point of his career. And when you look at it, even a guy like Nathan Rourke at $284,700 in 2026, which on the one hand is a lot of money. On the other hand, honestly, how much money would Nathan Rourke be making if he went to the market and literally just decided to sign with whatever team offered him the most cash? I would be comfortable speculating he'd be making at least $800,000, given his status as the league MOP, given his all-important Canadian passport, and given the fact that he's just the best player, right? This isn't someone who won MOP because three guys in front of him got hurt. This is a guy who won MOP because he is the best player in the league, and he's also in his prime, comfortably right in the middle of his mid-20s, right? So this is a guy who I think left money on the table. Chad Kelly is number 2 at 625. I'm not convinced Chad Kelly would get that on the open market just because of how little he's played the last 2 years. But other than that, if you look at Vernon Adams Jr. at 4, Bo Levi Mitchell at 5, Trevor Harris at 6, or even Davis Alexander, Cody Fajardo, I think a lot of these guys are clearly prioritizing building quality teams around them more so than simply maximizing their dollar. And that was the thing that jumped up most to me, because this is not a league like we see, for example, in the NFL, where even mediocre quarterbacks are getting, 2, 3, 4 times the money that elite players at other positions are. This is a league that has a lot more balance. And honestly, I kind of like that.
Hodge, I'm glad you brought that up because that actually leads naturally into my point here, where I think as a whole, CFL quarterbacks take less than their NFL counterparts. And we're doing rough math here, so bear with me. But you noted Nathan Rourke and Chad Kelly there. Nathan Rourke, the highest paid player in the league, Chad Kelly, second, and they happen to play the quarterback position. Well, they're roughly around 10% of the CFL salary cap in 2026. Whereas you look at some of the NFL counterparts, especially the highest paid guys, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence, even Josh Allen. They're around that 20% mark of the total salary cap, if not higher. Joe Burrow is above 24% in terms of what his salary is with relation to the NFL's salary cap. Now, we're not talking about the sheer numbers because obviously it's more money. We're talking about within relation to the salary cap. So I think a number of players, and as funny as it might sound, even Chad Kelly and Nathan Rourke have, in a way, prioritized having a talented roster around them and perhaps not gone to the absolute maximum value in their deals, let alone on down the list. I think Trevor Harris is one that sticks out to me, a guy that's coming off winning a Grey Cup MVP award and becoming one of the rare quarterbacks to lead the Saskatchewan Roughriders to a Grey Cup championship. He could have asked for a whole bunch of more money. He has so much leverage, but he wants to keep a talented team intact as much as was possible in Saskatchewan. So that to me is a theme overall about these Canadian Football League quarterbacks, especially when you look at their NFL counterparts.
Absolutely. And when you look at some of the other positions, I also like looking at the market and the way that it shifts every year in terms of positional value, right? A few years ago, whether it was Eugene Lewis, Kenny Lawler, even if you go back to Darrell Walker, the receiver market absolutely exploded, right? When the cap was substantially lower, we had guys making $300,000. That's no longer the case. That market has clearly come down a little bit. And I think some of that money has flowed into the running back market, where you have Brady Oliveira making close to $300,000. Yes, he's way ahead of everybody else at that position, but there's also a lot of guys in the 175 to 185 category where that was kind of unthinkable, right? If you go back 5-6 years, you maybe would have had like the ratio breaking Andrew Harris's in that $200,000 range. But, as an American, it was really tough to get that high. If you're an American, like premium money is 150 in those days. These days, there's a lot of Americans making a lot more than that. So it's interesting to see how the money has flowed in certain positions or flowed out of certain positions. And that's one of the reasons why I like doing this series. And just as a little plug, we will be doing at the end of this series, with DBs concluding on Sunday, a Monday article with just the top 20 to 30 players, regardless of positions. So that'll give people a chance to look not just at, okay, how do these players compare to others at the same spot? It's going to give people an opportunity to go, okay, how in terms of true dollars do the top players stack up? In other words, where is the top rated running back in relation to the quarterbacks? Or where is the top O-lineman in comparison to the D-line? Or where's the top DB in comparison to linebackers? Those types of things. So keep an eye out for that on Monday.
When I look at these lists as a whole, I think that Kenny Lawler is a bargain for the Ticats. We have Keon Hatcher as the highest paid receiver in the Canadian Football League, and our rankings are based on hard money. So some of this can change if incentives are met, specifically maximum values. But Keon Hatcher is the highest paid receiver in the Canadian Football League from a highest paid standpoint. No, what am I saying? A hard money standpoint in 2026. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it, but you look at him, $287,500 as the highest paid receiver. You go down to Kenny Lawler, he's at number 4, $263,700. So to your point about Darrell Walker exploding that receiver market, I think that's continued. Geno Lewis, I think, put another layer on that when he got his big deal from the Edmonton Elks. So I think when I break it down, I'm looking at Lawler thinking like, this guy, in my opinion, is the best receiver in the Canadian Football League. So to have him 4th on that list, if you're the Hamilton Tiger Cats, is an absolute steal.
CFL general managers Kyle Walters and Ryan Rigmaiden expressed concerns from a football operations perspective with the league's Victoria Day regular season start, slated to become the norm in 2027 and beyond. What could the CFL office have done better to negotiate this process?
Probably talk to the people that it's going to affect most and get a real sense of what might happen. First and foremost, there are universities around this country where some of the CFL teams hold their training camps that will still have classes in session or exams going on. So there's a chance there, perhaps, where those dorm rooms where teams have those training camps, like, for example, the Toronto Argonauts at the University of Guelph. Yes, I'm saying it because it's my alma mater, but I know that university the best. Not all the students will be out of there. So I think that could create a possible issue. And then also the possibility that that might have an effect on your budget for the season. Like, by and large part, having these camps at universities allows you to save a lot of money because you can put all the players in the dorms instead of having to put them up in hotels. That is going to, I think, affect the bottom lines potentially for these Canadian Football League teams. And then there's the CFL Draft component to this, and also the NFL Draft component as well for, yes, Canadian players potentially being selected in the NFL Draft or signing as undrafted free agents or going to rookie minicamps, but also Americans as well. We've already seen it, Hodge. There have been some American players who did not get selected in the NFL Draft, did not get an undrafted free agent contract, did not get invited to an NFL rookie minicamp, that have signed contracts with CFL teams. But if you're still in that process and you don't know how that's going to play out, especially as an American, why would you sign a CFL contract? So you might have scenarios where Canadian and American players don't actually get to your training camp until possibly midway through, if not near the end of even the preseason. So I just wish that when these decisions, and they are big decisions, moving the season back 2 weeks is a major decision. I just hope when these decisions are made in the future that at least Stuart Johnston and the people who are behind this talk to the individuals that are involved in this and understand, okay, what are the issues here? What barriers to entry could there be for us potentially moving the training camp back 2 weeks, the CFL Draft? It's not just as easy as saying, yeah, we're doing it, everybody deal with it. And then when you do that, nobody likes to just be told what to do and not have any input. I think it would create much more buy-in if you had a conversation with the key stakeholders in the league who this is going to affect, and at least let them feel like they're being heard. So to me, that is a no-brainer when you're making any major decision, especially as a commissioner in this league who is just over a year into his tenure. Talk to the people that this is going to affect, and really it's going to affect their jobs. I think from the CFL Draft perspective, you can get over it because in the past we've had players been selected as what they used to call redshirt juniors a year in advance, right? The prime example of that was Danny Watkins being selected in the first round by the BC Lions, and then a year later went in the first round of the NFL Draft. Nobody's going to be able to predict that. So you're not drafting a year out, you're changing it by a couple weeks. So I think that's doable, but still at least have some of these conversations so you can make a smart, well-informed decision.
Well, and I can say this year, the only there were only kind of three guys who their projection in the draft maybe didn't go exactly how people thought. Kevin Klein, the late qualifier offensive lineman out of Boston College, as well as Malik Mega, receiver out of Coastal Carolina. I think most CFL teams projected them as minicamp guys down south, not necessarily undrafted free agents. They both ended up signing undrafted free agents. Klein is in Miami, whereas the Carolina Panthers signed Mega. The other one that was maybe a bit of a surprise was Rene Conga going undrafted out of Louisville. I think especially once he lit up his pro day, a lot of teams thought, okay, he could now be a round 6 or round 7 pick. That did not happen, but he did sign with the Dolphins and get a ton of guaranteed money for an undrafted free agent. So he's almost essentially at this point a late round pick, given how much he was guaranteed by Miami. So there were a few surprises, but it's not like there were any crazy shocks. The other thing I will throw out there is Niklas Henning. We're going to talk about it a little bit later in the show. Was a minicamp guy, goes number 2 overall because most CFL teams go, minicamp? What are the odds you're actually going to get a contract? And then boom, he does. So the point is, it's not a perfect system right now. There's still some risk and reward with all of these guys relative to the NFL. And also, the draft is always risk reward anyway, right? There's always guys who go round 3, round 4, who end up being really good players and spending 12, 13 years in the league. And there's always at least one guy in round 1 who busts and retires 2 years later, right? Like that just happens every year. So the draft part of it doesn't super bother me. Kyle Walters, I thought, had a really good quote on that in JC's article. And that's the article we're referencing, by the way. If you haven't read it, please do. It's great. But the article essentially was Kyle saying, look, imagine that next year, quote, we're doing this 2 weeks before the NFL draft, close quote. Like that's what he said on draft night to his colleagues and indicated, expressed some of the same concerns that we just did. The red flag for me in this article, Justin, was Dwayne Veneux, president of the BC Lions, when asked by JC via telephone exclusively about the timeline, he said, and I quote, honestly, it's a consequence that I didn't personally pre-think of, close quote. And he said that in reference to the fact that the BC Lions rely on a local college to put up their players for rookie camp and training camp. And the fact that this is something that Veneux didn't think about, like, oh, the college isn't going to be empty for us to use the dorms, is concerning for me. I will give Veneux credit. He did say, quote, we're going to have some challenges there, but we'll figure out what the solution is, close quote. This is also somebody who's losing his stadium for the Lions this year for FIFA World Cup. So, like, this is a team that has shown they can overcome obstacles, they can figure things out, and Amar Dolman has obviously been very financially supportive of the team. So, again, will this get worked out? Yeah, I'm sure it will. But the fact that this wasn't something you thought about earlier is a concern for me. The other issue is exams, right? And let's actually throw out these 2027 dates. So these are courtesy of the CFL. The league next year will have rookie camps start on April 21st. Training camps will open April 24th. Now, for reference point, this year's training camps are opening on May 10th. So they're essentially bumping everything up 3 weeks or so. And if you're a student, let's say a student athlete, you're finishing your degree, CFL Draft happens on April 13th. You're a second round pick to the Toronto Argonauts. Great. Let's say you're studying in the NCAA. You're at Penn State. I'm just throwing out a random school. Okay, so that's only about a 5-hour drive away, I think. But what happens if you have an exam scheduled for April 25th? Do you go for rookie camp on the 21st and then come back for your exam? Or do you file paperwork requesting an early exam? Or do you just tell the Argonauts, look, I need this degree. I need to do my exams. I'm going to be late for training camp. Another thought is a guy like Neuer Gatkoff, who was the 4th overall pick to the Bombers. He is attending rookie minicamp in the NFL this weekend. Minicamps are not going to move in the NFL to benefit the CFL. They're going to stay the same. So if this was next year, you'd have a situation where the Bombers open rookie camp on the 21st, they open training camp on the 24th, and then they have to wait 2.5 full weeks to see if Gatkoff is going to get an NFL contract, at which point you're almost in the regular season before you see your first round pick. So Are any of these like absolute unmitigated disasters? No. And I actually think the CFL is really smart to try to make more hay when the weather's good, right? We only get so much good weather in this country, and I'm speaking as a prairie boy, where our springs can be hit and miss, and the fall is very short, right? The summer is a true summer. It's a beautiful summer, but it's not very long, and winter it hits hard, right? It hits like a brick when it decides to show up. So I think that's smart, but some of these obstacles are real obstacles. And again, the fact that not all of them are maybe fully anticipated is a bit of a red flag for me.
That's a fair point. I think we should balance it out and say that the focus for the league is increased revenue. And there has been talk in the public by Randy Ambrosie in the past before to say that summer games in the Canadian Football League bring in more revenue than games in the fall and potentially the winter. And I think you nailed it there, Hodge. These are not logistical items that can't be worked through. But I think, if I go back to the Grey Cup in Winnipeg this past November, the weather there was fine. I understand moving up the season, but Stuart Johnston's claim here was when he went around talking to CFL fans last year and asked them, well, when does the season start? The answer that he got was sometime in June, but that's not the case. It started the first week in June now for at least a little while. I don't know how many seasons off the top of my head, but it has been the first week of June. So I understand wanting to, in his words, plant a flag on Victoria Day weekend. But Hodge, was it not snowing in Winnipeg for the first day of rookie camp?
Yeah, it did. I mean, and look, like, I will say, especially with smoke in the summertime, teams are having to go indoors more and more anyway. And the Bombers are a team that can quite easily go indoors if they need to. I know there's also pretty easy indoor options in Regina, in Edmonton, in Calgary. And those are the four markets where I think you're most concerned about poor weather, right? That makes sense. Those are your prairie teams. Those are your teams that are in the West. Obviously, Vancouver's in the West, but their weather is nothing like the West. That's West Coast weather. That's a different ball of yarn. So, yes, it was snowing. It was 2 degrees during the first rookie camp practice and windy and cloudy. And I would imagine that there were some rookie Americans going, where the hell am I? Like, what is going on? Where I live, it has been 80 degrees and sunny every day for the last 3 months. And I get off the plane, and this is like the coldest weather I've ever experienced. Like, that is... I'd imagine that's running through some of their heads. I didn't obviously get to talk to all of them. I talked to Taylor Elgersma. I talked to Dante Daniels, the team's second-round pick and their highest drafted pick, who's in camp, and Zach Claris, a few other folks, Mike O'Shea, of course. But yes, I would imagine that was a thing. So yeah, there's going to be some nasty weather. Totally get that. I don't think that's a deal breaker for the CFL. It certainly isn't, and I don't even think it's for me either. If players have to grit it out through some lousy weather to start the year, then they can go to the PA, they can complain, and then get moved inside. Right? That's a thing you can do. I think for the league, they're saying every year we waste the first month of nice weather while these guys are in camps. Let's bump it up. And again, to that, I think it's really smart. I just think it would be better instead of being like making this announcement and then being reactionary, going, whoa, here's 17 things we didn't think of. Maybe the process should be more aligned, like, okay, we want to do this. What are the 17 obstacles that we need to anticipate before we publicly commit to it? That's maybe the better process.
That's exactly my point. Cross the T's, dot the I's before you roll it out. And you can't control the weather. That's what I was getting at with my point here, is that it was beautiful that November week in Winnipeg, really for the majority of the week. And then now we're going to shove, what's that?
They lucked out on the weather for sure for Grey Cup.
And now they're going to shove training camp back 2 weeks, and you're going to have guys trying to fight for a career in the Canadian Football League, potentially doing so in poor weather. Like, I get it. The weather is unpredictable, but I just wonder if this was even really needed in the Canadian Football League. They had already moved the season up, and I'll tell you what would help out to condense the CFL season. get a 10th team. You get a 10th team and you keep the calendar as it is starting that first week in June. I think that is an ideal situation in so many different ways. Now, I understand that you just can't snap your finger and have a 10th team there, but that's what I'm talking about when you go through these logistical items or you look at the longer term. It's like, hey, well, we do want to move the season up. What makes the most sense? Well, I think it makes the most sense if you do get a 10th team, and I'm hesitant to even mention it because it's been talked about for so long. If you get a 10th team, everybody has one bye, that easily moves the season up, condenses the season down 2 weeks. And I think puts you in a great setup in terms of the calendar with regard to the NFL and then the CFL draft and having these guys up here, because that time is valuable. Like, that's the other part that football people are scratching their head about. They're going, somebody in a suit is telling us to just deal with it, but then they want the product to stay the exact same. So
Right.
To your point, Hodge, as you laid out for these guys, if they're not going to be in training camp, if they are Canadians playing in the NCAA that perhaps have never played or have not played the 3-down game for a long time, they need that time to get either reacclimated or acclimated. So I think this is what, quite frankly, upsets football people in the Canadian Football League is, again, when they're just told to do something and the product is expected to be the same. And especially when some of their jobs are on the line, depending on what your previous season was and how you're going into this season. So those are some of the things are being talked about behind the scenes and that I think need to be brought to light here. Have those conversations, go through a lengthy process where everybody can feel involved and come to a smart decision instead of making what I feel like is a snap call and having one of your presidents admit that one of the major factors in moving this season back hadn't even been thought about. You should be having those conversations with all of your presidents across the board, arguably all of your general managers and head coaches. How is this going to affect your day-to-day, your operation, and potentially the most important aspect of this league, which is ultimately the product that is on the field? I don't think that part has been explored enough here because it is a major piece to the Canadian Football League drawing revenue. So my solution, Stuart Johnston, go out and get that 10th team. That condenses the season down by 2 weeks. Everybody has one bye. You start the season the first week of June when I don't even think there's a guarantee, Hodge, that on the May 2-4 weekend, bro, I'm talking about even in Southern Ontario where it's nice weather. We've had snow in Southern Ontario before on May 2-4. Like that has happened. So
Yeah.
I understand you don't want to play in the winter, but there's also no guarantee on the front end of the season.
Yeah, and the home opener, not this past year. I'd have to check my notes, but I think it was 2 years ago, 2024 in Winnipeg. The Alouettes came to town. I think that was the Grey Cup rematch game. And I want to say it was 8 degrees. Like, it was absolutely atrocious weather. It felt like an October, like Halloween football game. Like, it was miserable in Winnipeg. And then after that, the weather was great, I think, for the rest of the year. So your point's well taken. I get it. We'll have to wait and see how it turns out.
Hodge, you broke down 5 Winnipeg Blue Bombers position battles to watch in 2026 training camp. But what is the most important one to focus on? We'll let the people go read your piece, but break us down with just one of those key spots.
I mean, it's got to be the quarterback spot, right? I mean, obviously the number one job is not up for grabs. Zach Collaros is going to be the starting quarterback of this team in 2026 as long as he's healthy. But like, this is a club that has 4 other quarterbacks under contract, and Cole Ansiu out of Manitoba is with them through the QB internship program. But so there's 6 quarterbacks in camp, but 4 really competing to be the number 2 behind Zach Collaros. And of those 4, you've only got one with previous CFL experience, Terry Wilson, who's been with the club for the last 2 years, but has only thrown 22 meaningful pass attempts over that time. 0 touchdowns, 1 pick, no starts, right? Like, that is not a sparkling resume for a 2-year veteran. The other 3 are all really intriguing. Bryce Perkins won a Super Bowl with the Rams, started a game for them, was then the MVP of the UFL in 2025. He's a little bit older. He's 29, but he's a dual threat guy. He's done off-field training with Chris Streveler in Arizona, where they both lived during the offseason. And his father was also a fullback in the CFL with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, actually played with Mike O'Shea. Mike indicated on Wednesday that him and Bryce may or may not have swapped some stories about the old man and what it was like being together with the Tabbies. You've also got Peyton Thorne, a guy who started 48 games at two major collegiate programs, Michigan State and Auburn, with a winning record. At Auburn, he was coached by Kent Austin, who's, of course, a Grey Cup winning quarterback and a Grey Cup winning head coach in the CFL. And then, of course, we've got Taylor Elgersma, who I don't think needs any introduction at this point. This is the most exciting group of quarterbacks I would feel comfortable to say that Winnipeg's had in camp in a decade. And I would almost go as far as to say the most exciting group of first-year quarterbacks that any CFL team has in camp this year and possibly has had for the last few years. Like, these are three guys that I think are worth getting excited about. Now, we've also had a ton of big-name quarterbacks through college, whatever, come to the CFL and do nothing, stink out the joint, go home, you never hear about them again. So I'm not trying to sell anybody as being the second coming, but for a team that desperately needs an heir apparent to Zach Collaros, a guy who turns 38 in August, who is on the record said 2026 could be his last season, I think this is the most intriguing group to watch. And depending on how much Collaros plays during the preseason, all three, or four, I should say, with Terry Wilson included, should get the opportunity to show what they can do during preseason. For the record, I was there for the full practice on Wednesday, very small sample size. On the 12-on-12, they each quarterback got like a couple of reps. But to me, it was obvious the one with the most arm talent is Taylor Elgersma. He's the least mobile of the four, but I mean, the guy's got a freaking rocket, as we've seen time and time again. So that's the one I'm really excited to watch in Winnipeg, is that backup QB battle, because it's not just for backup this year. It could potentially be the face of the franchise 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road.
And you told me, Hodge, that you also felt like Elgersma was the most accurate quarterback on that day, correct?
Yeah, I would say so. I thought Bryce Perkins struggled with his accuracy a little bit. I thought Peyton Thorne did some good things. Terry Wilson, I think I haven't watched him a ton in practice, but I have seen a few of his practices over the years and watched him closely. And he's just very inconsistent. He has high highs, low lows. And I think that's been on display when he's played in limited regular season action. So again, and by the way, I didn't really watch a lot of the other positions just because rookie camp, it's rookies on rookies, right? So once actual training camp gets going, that's where I'll be watching more of the rookies when they get chances to go against vets and watch them. But right now, the quarterbacks, because of course the veteran quarterbacks do go to rookie camp, all the other veterans do not. So that's the position I was keying in on. And I'm excited to go Sunday again and check that out and see how the quarterbacks look in Bomberland.
You can talk about all these guys potentially being the backup, but I think we need to drive it home that every team in the Canadian Football League wants to have two bona fide quarterbacks on the roster. And really, I'll just flat out say it. I think Taylor Elgersma is one hit away from potentially being on the field. I think this guy is a legitimate prospect. And yes, it was only one day, but based on what Hodge reported from one day of rookie minicamp, it looks like he's already ahead of the rest of the group that's there in Winnipeg. And I just know from a processing standpoint in him retaining the offensive playbook that this guy has essentially a photographic memory. Like when he was in Green Bay, they were putting in around 150 plays a day, he told me, and that didn't seem to bother him. And he played at a high level in the preseason there. So I think Elgersma is far and away the clear favorite to win the backup job there. And fans need to remember that, yes, we want to see Collaros play as long as possible, but he has missed some time in recent years. And we all know how many knocks he's had to the head. So it's very important that Winnipeg finds a bona fide backup, and also that same person could potentially be the heir apparent, if I can speak, or perhaps there's a couple. So I think the hype is real with Taylor Elgersma, but he needs to continue to prove it, especially in the preseason, to be able to win that number 2 job.
Well, it's wild, the fact that this is his 6th professional training camp. 6th. He had 3 in the CFL through the internship program, 2 of which were with the Argonauts, 1 with the Tiger Cats. He then, of course, went to camp with the Packers in 2025 and the Birmingham Stallions earlier this year. So, yes, on the one hand, he's 24. He's from U Sports. He's never played a regular season game at the professional level. On the other hand, this is camp number 6. So, like, when you listen to him talk, he doesn't sound like your average rookie. He doesn't sound bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. He sounds dialed in, and he sounds focused. And he was even talking about trying to be a leader and show first-year guys what it's like to get through camp. How are you successful in camp? How can you learn things quickly? So I will add one thing, Justin. If you're the Bombers and you think that Taylor Elgersma is going to be your guy for the next 10 to 15 years, I do wonder if to start this season, you actually want him as the 3. And the reason I say that is like Bo Levi Mitchell back in the day was arguably the second best quarterback right from the get-go in Calgary, but they did not have him as the number 2. It was Kevin Glenn and Drew Tate because they wanted to protect Bo and they wanted him to be ready when he actually got out onto the field. And I almost wonder, like, you've got Terry Wilson, who's kind of a veteran backup now. You've got Bryce Perkins, first-year CFLer, but like a veteran pro. Would you ever be tempted for your depth chart to end up being like Kalaris Wilson Elgersma or Kalaris Perkins Elgersma just to protect him? Or obviously I don't want to disclude Peyton Thorne, who again could be the best of the bunch. We don't yet know. But that's a thought I had, and that's a conversation that may or may not have come up with other guys in the media as we were chatting during practice. Like, where do you want to fit him in? Even if he is the best, do you put him at number 2 right away? Because if Kalaris, if knock on wood, 2019 happens again where he lasts 2 plays, that's a lot to put on the kid, right? He is technically a rookie, but obviously that's a decision for the Bombers brass to make.
It's a decent idea. I don't want to go saying that this guy's a guaranteed 10 to 15 year pro because you have to go out and earn it. There's a lot of potential there, no doubt. And we've hyped him up, certainly. But I think to your point, it ultimately would come down to what situation is the team in. And really, when you get into the season, even if you start 1-2, 2-1, 0-3, depending where you're at, there's pressure to win now. And I think especially with this veteran group in Winnipeg that has gotten a little bit younger through what they've done in recent CFL drafts and free agency, that I think you would want to have the best player on the field. And I do believe that's going to be Taylor Elgersma. But again, he's got to go out and earn it. I think he understands that. And as you have laid out, there are some other talented quarterbacks on the roster there. But it did not surprise me that you reported back that he was essentially the most comfortable quarterback out there in rookie minicamp because he's played this game at a high level at Wilfrid Laurier. He went into an NFL camp and played well enough by a bunch of people's accounts to earn a roster spot, if not a practice roster spot there in Green Bay. And it should be noted that if he could have gotten a P1 work visa, he would have ended up starting for the Baltimore Stallions, Birmingham Stallions. I keep making that mistake. Birmingham Stallions in the United Football League because Matt Corral was traded away the same week that Elgersma decided to pull shoot, which was, I think, the right decision, and come to Canada. So it's an interesting discussion to have, the one that you had with some of the other media members there in Winnipeg, but ultimately it's professional football. And I think just knowing Taylor Elgersma, he is going to be prepared to play if his number is called upon. I think potentially protecting him is interesting. Like, let's say Winnipeg gets off to sort of a 500 start and maybe Claro suffers an injury. Hopefully that doesn't happen. To your point, you have Terry Wilson. Do you see how he does for a game or two while you're still allowing Elgersma to develop and learn behind the scenes and go on a road trip and see how well he knows the playbook and just all of that routine that he hasn't been able to get into yet from an actual playing games that count perspective? Yes, I do think there is some validity to that. So I think a lot of it depends on the thought process with the regime that's in there, led by, Wade Miller, Kyle Walters, and Mike O'Shea, how they view his long-term future, but also the now. If you start 0-3 and Elgersma's your best guy, he's probably going to be the one that's run out there as your starter if something happened to Claros.
Dunk, as of Saturday, we'll be publishing your breakdown of position battles to watch in Riderville. What is the most important position battle for Rough Riders fans to focus on?
They would probably talk about backup quarterback with Jack Cohn and Tommy Stevens and Braden Shaggers there, who I think is under the radar and deserves to be mentioned. And Jordan McLeod has some intriguing athleticism. And then there's also the kicker spot with Brett Lawther having been released in the offseason. And Michael Hughes is probably the favorite in terms of an incumbent there. The guy booted a 90-yard single last year, which was unbelievable. Like, the guy's got some crazy leg strength. But to me, the most important spot for the Riders on a mostly veteran roster is that defensive end position opposite James Vaughters. Based on his contract, which I believe is around $175,000 in hard money, Vaughters is going to be a starter, okay? But the Riders need a bona fide starter on the other side and arguably a legitimate rotational guy when you look at who they lost in free agency and Shane Ray's essentially not back with the team. Malik Carney goes to Edmonton. Habakkuk Baldonado, who is a global but is essentially just as good as a bunch of American pass rushers in this league, went to Ottawa. And then Ray, not with the Riders. So they need, I think, 2 American defensive ends to step up. Naturally, you would think Aaron Patrick would have the lead foot, let's call it, to potentially win that starting role. He had 1 sack in a preseason game last year against Winnipeg and then went on to record 16 defensive tackles plus 7 special teams tackles. And some people in Saskatchewan have talked about, well, you maybe don't want to start him at defensive end if he's such a good special teamer. If this guy can rush the passer, they will find somebody else to play special teams, okay? That is a premium position. So Patrick, I think, is certainly a guy that you have to watch. Next on my list would be Chico Bennett Jr., signed with the Riders late September last year and dressed for his first CFL game less than a month later. So clearly, he was putting in the work that Corey Mason, now Joshua Bell, the defensive coordinator, require to get himself on the field so quickly. So I think those two are the favorites to compete for that starting spot and then also be in that rotational position, because we saw it last year, even when the Riders were healthy, that there was a rotation there, not only on the interior, but on the edge in terms of defensive ends. Then you have a big group of Americans that are unproven in the Canadian Football League game that the Riders have stacked up throughout the offseason. So to your point to start the show, you never know how a training camp is going to go. So even though we're looking at Aaron Patrick and Chico Bennett Jr. to be the top guys there, if there are players from that American group at the edge position that do well in training camp, flash in preseason action, and are consistent, then I think there's a job there to be won. Because in reality, you look around the Saskatchewan Roughriders roster, there's not too many starting positions that are wide open. This is certainly one of them. The other one would be American receiver, and there's going to be a competition, at weak side linebacker, I think, between Aubrey Miller Jr. and Josh Woods. But other than that, I think defensive end is the main spot because the team needs to be able to get after the passer the same way they were able to when Carney and Ray and Baldonado and those guys were going and getting after it last season for the team.
As a draft junkie, and I think your analysis is totally on point, I'm excited to see who that third Canadian receiver is. Duncan Busby going to a contract year. Deshaun Mims, ultra athletic. Daniel Lieb ripped it up with the Saskatchewan Huskies last year. And then this team also drafted a couple of productive collegiate receivers in Dylan DeJete and Shamar McBean. So obviously Jake Verbaker and Sam Emilus are in the starting lineup. But outside of those two, who is the Canadian receiver who's going to step up? I can't wait to see how that shapes up.
I think it's still Duncan Busby, just real quick.
Well, we don't know it's him. It could be someone else.
Jeremy O'Day spoke to it and at least said he would have the first chance. And, to your point, you're right. But I think a guy you got to mention in there when you're talking about the CFL draft is Daniel Weeb. Had an outstanding training camp last year, went back to the University of Saskatchewan for his final year, won the Canada West Player of the Year award, was absolutely electric for that team that had, stuff going on at the quarterback position with Anton Ammonrood and his cancer diagnosis, and then Jake Farrell coming in and helping that team get to the Vanier Cup. But that didn't affect his production. So I think Daniel Weeb could potentially be a factor for that starting role as a Canadian receiver, but also as a key depth piece there. I think he's really flashed despite being undersized. And then when you're talking about the receiving core, that's where another position is open in terms of a American starter with Dante Myers down currently under contract with the Cincinnati Bengals. There's a bunch of Americans there, guys with NFL pedigree to small school guys that I think will be an intriguing competition to watch.
Let's go to Hodge's heritage moment. On this day in 1994, Jim Finks passed away of lung cancer at the age of 66. The longtime NFL personnel man had a reputation for turning struggling franchises into winners by drafting well and making shrewd long-term decisions. Finks got his first personnel job in the CFL with the Calgary Stampeders, serving as the team's general manager for 8 seasons. The St. Louis native made a number of CFL-related moves over his NFL career, including the hiring of Bud Grant as the head coach in Minnesota, signing Joe Kapp away from the BC Lions, and drafting Canadian running back Ruben Mays with the Saints in 1986. Finks is the only former member of the CFL personnel group to ever be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And by pure coincidence, today is also the anniversary of Joe Kapp's passing. So R.I.P. Jim Finks and Joe Kapp.
Let's go to the 3-minute drill. Saskatchewan Roughriders CFL draft pick. Promising linebacker Seth Hundeby has retired from football. Did that surprise you?
I mean, he's a super smart guy with good off-field opportunities, so no. But I will say, just for me, as someone who loved watching him play, I'm sad I won't get to see him play for the Riders. He was a beast. Zach Collaros enjoyed his CFL on TSN broadcast stint during the 112th Grey Cup in Winnipeg. Would he be a quality broadcast analyst?
Man, I think he could be really good. He could talk to, his buddy Jason Kelsey, who's doing his thing with ESPN on Monday Night Football, if he needed some advice, or I'm sure there's other people he could talk to as well. I think he would be a high-quality analyst. The Montreal Alouettes released former first-round CFL draft pick Jesse Gibbon. Could his CFL career be done?
I don't think so. I don't think this was performance-related. I think he might be injured. So we'll have to wait and see if and when he gets signed again. Canadian receiver Chase Claypool attended rookie minicamp with the Green Bay Packers, but was reportedly not offered a contract. Is he coming to Canada?
Hopefully it happens, but we got to wait and see. Doesn't seem like NFL is legitimately in his future anymore. The Ottawa Red Blacks signed veteran Canadian center Sean McEwen after he suffered a torn ACL with the Saskatchewan Roughriders in training camp last year. Could he start in the nation's capital?
According to the preview from our guy Santino Filoso, he absolutely could. And if McEwen gets back to the peak of his game, I think he's really good. The Edmonton Elks have signed Canadian defensive lineman Darian Newell to a 3-year rookie contract after he served his 1-year suspension for PEDs. Can he make an impact for the Elks?
Definitely. This dude is an absolute beast, and I think someone that Edmonton was happy to select where they did in the draft last year because of his potential upside. The Toronto Argonauts are having a Looney Dogs game on Friday, October 23rd. How many Looney Dogs could you down in one night?
Without getting sick, I could probably eat 3. If I was willing to get sick, I could. Yeah, I'm not a huge hot dog guy. I could probably do 6, but I wouldn't like it. Syracuse and Wake Forest are scheduled to play the first game of their respective seasons at BMO Field on August 28th or 29th of next year. Why are Canadian football hardcore fans upset?
Because they think that it's MLSE's American invasion that's continuing. I don't necessarily think these things are connected. August 28th or 29th, by my look, is a Monday or a Tuesday. I think it's a smart way for there to be more revenue at BMO Field and for all the parties that are attached to this. So I don't think there's anything more to be read into it. After its second annual draft tracker crash, the CFL told you, Hodge, the league promised to provide an update on its new website before the start of the 2026 season. Do you believe we'll actually get one?
I hope so. That's all I can say. I've got a ton of questions from fans about when the new website is coming, when the new app is coming. The league has promised an update before the season. That's all I can tell you. In a story you broke, Dunk, second overall CFL draft pick, Niklas Henning has signed with the Las Vegas Raiders. Do you think he makes the team?
I think there's a possibility, likely not for the 53-man roster after training camp, and there's still an offseason to go here. But if he can show well and pick up the playbook, and he's a smart guy because he went to Queen's University, then I think there's a legitimate possibility that Henning can at least battle for a practice roster spot down there in Las Vegas. That does it for this edition of the 3DownNation podcast. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. You can find out how to do that on our homepage at 3downnation.com. And hope everybody's excited for training camp. Real football drawing more and more near as the regular season looms.